I believe in Jesus Christ. But do I believe in him for spiritual reasons or for...
And finally, he told me, look, they do it. They are going to make a big film.
No one saw it coming that day. It was 1977 on the set of Jesus of Nazareth. And until today, the cast still talks about it.
I think it's quite a remarkable thing that you are now actually the perceived image of Jesus Christ.
Making a film, working with an Italian crew.
Robert Powell hadn't even fully stepped onto the set when it happened. The noise just stopped. Conversations froze. Extras who had been laughing went silent. Crew members adjusting equipment paused. No one told them to be quiet. Yet suddenly, everyone was. To everyone there, he became the image of Jesus Christ. Join us in this video as we examine the unusual occurrence that happened while filming Jesus of Nazareth 1977. The most important elements that made the film come alive. In 1975, Franco Zeffirelli sat across from a relatively unknown British actor, studying his face carefully. Robert Powell wasn't famous. He had done some television work, taken on a few minor roles, nothing that would make people recognize him on the street. But Zeffirelli wasn't looking for a star. He was looking for something else entirely. Each evening, he would return to his space alone. He'd go over the next day's scenes, sit quietly with the words, and let them settle. At first, people thought it was just shyness. Then they assumed it was method acting. But Powell explained it differently later on. He said he needed the actors playing the disciples to feel something real when they looked at him on camera. Because if they spent their evenings laughing, playing cards, and joking together, that feeling would disappear. So he kept his distance. And because of that, something unexpected began to happen. The actors playing Peter, John, and Matthew, men hired to portray followers of Jesus, started to feel something around him. Not fear, not discomfort, something subtler than that. It was the kind of feeling you get when you're in the presence of someone whose authority you can't fully explain, but instinctively respect. And that feeling carried onto the screen. If you watch the disciples' faces in the series, you'll notice it. They're not just acting reverent. They're experiencing something close to it. But Powell's distance from the cast wasn't the only thing that made his performance so unusual. There was something else: his eyes. Early in filming, the director, Franco Zeffirelli, noticed that close-up shots of Powell's face had something striking about them. He couldn't quite explain it at first. Then he realized Powell barely blinked, and it wasn't accidental. Powell had trained himself to hold eye contact for long stretches, keeping his gaze steady far longer than in normal conversation. Zeffirelli leaned into it. The lighting was carefully adjusted to highlight his eyes, to catch the desert light in a way that made them seem almost luminous. What resulted didn't just feel like filmmaking, it felt closer to a portrait, something still, intense, and quietly powerful. The result was a gaze people still struggle to describe. Those who first watched the series as children in 1977 and then revisited it years later often say the same thing. When Jesus looks at someone in the film, it feels like he's looking straight at you. That wasn't accidental. It was the result of months of quiet, disciplined preparation by an actor who understood one crucial truth: the face of Jesus would outlast everything else in the production. And he was right. Nearly 50 years later, Robert Powell's face is still the image millions of people picture when they think of Christ. You'd think they used the best place to create this experience, but they didn't. Tunisia didn't look like a movie set. It looked like a place time had simply forgotten. When Franco Zeffirelli and his team arrived in the mid-1970s to scout locations, they weren't searching for something beautiful. They were searching for something real. They wanted landscapes that didn't need explanation, places that would make viewers feel, instinctively, that they were looking at first-century Judea. What they found in North Africa went beyond what they expected. Stone villages with narrow, winding paths, hills that opened into wide, silent valleys, and a desert light that stretched long and golden across the land, casting shadows that looked like they had stepped out of ancient biblical paintings. The landscape didn't need much adjustment. In many scenes, it simply needed to be captured. But the location did something else, something no one had planned for. What was this? And how did it add to the breathtaking nature of the final production? Keep watching to find out. The hand of God seemed to be involved in the filming. The location changed the people working in it. Seemed like God himself was intentional about this shoot. Actors who were used to studio productions described the experience in Tunisia and Morocco as completely different. Because on a studio set, you always know where you are. You can see the lights. You know where the walls end. You're aware of the ceiling above you. It never quite lets you forget that you're acting. But something changed out there. Standing on a hillside in the North African desert, looking out over a wide, empty valley, dressed in first-century clothing, the sense of acting began to fade. It no longer felt artificial. Several cast members later said the same thing. Filming in those locations helped them connect to the story in a way no indoor set ever could. They walked along dusty roads that looked untouched by time. They ate in the shade of old stone walls. And somehow, all those small physical details began to add up. For Robert Powell, the effect was even stronger. Years later, he recalled one particular moment. They were filming the Sermon on the Mount. Powell stood on a hillside, while hundreds of extras spread out below him across the slope. The cameras were set at a distance. Everything was ready. The light was right, and the wind had settled. And then, something quiet happened. For a brief moment, Powell said he forgot he was on a film set. Not dramatically or mystically. It just slipped away. The awareness of performing disappeared. What remained was simple. The hillside, the words, and the people listening below. So he spoke. He delivered the sermon. Behind the cameras, the crew barely moved. There's something about filming outdoors, in landscapes that feel truly ancient, that's almost impossible to recreate indoors. The scale is real. The sky is real. The wind is real. And when the story being told is one that billions of people consider sacred, those real elements carry a weight that goes beyond visuals. Franco Zeffirelli understood that from the very beginning. He didn't choose North Africa just because it looked right or because it fit the budget. He chose it because he believed the environment itself would shape the performances in ways no direction ever could. Like the hand of God was strong upon him. Amazingly, something began to shift on set. People started speaking in lower voices. Movements became more careful, more deliberate. The usual background chaos of a large production didn't disappear, but it pulled back, as if something quieter had taken its place. No one announced it. No meetings were called. No instructions were given. It just happened. By the time filming moved into the larger crowd scenes, the entry into Jerusalem, the teaching in the temple, the gathering in Galilee, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Whenever Robert Powell stepped into position, fully in costume, a stillness would settle over the entire set, and it had nothing to do with microphones or direction. Extras who had been laughing would suddenly fall silent. Crew members, caught mid-task, would pause. People would turn and simply watch. One assistant director later recalled standing at the edge of a massive crowd scene and realizing something strange. How strange was this occurrence? For how long did it go on? Let's see. The most unusual occurrence, while filming Jesus of Nazareth. Hundreds of people had gone completely still, not because someone called action, not because the cameras were rolling, just because Powell had walked into view. And somehow, the atmosphere changed. What made it even more striking was who those extras were. They weren't trained actors. Most were local residents from towns in Tunisia and Morocco, people brought in to fill out the crowd scenes. Many didn't speak English fluently. Some had little familiarity with the story being told. And many came from Muslim communities with no personal connection to the Christian narrative. And yet, when the figure of Jesus appeared before them, dressed in simple robes, moving quietly through the crowd with that unmistakable stillness, they responded. People began speaking in lower voices. Movements became more careful, more intentional. The usual background chaos of a large film production seemed to pull back, as if the set itself had quieted down. No one sent a memo. No one held a meeting. It simply happened. And as filming moved into the larger crowd scenes, the entry into Jerusalem, the teaching in the temple, the gatherings in Galilee, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever Robert Powell appeared in costume and took his place, a quiet would settle across the set that had nothing to do with microphones or direction. Extras who had been laughing would stop. Crew members mid-task would pause. People would turn and watch. One assistant director later recalled standing at the edge of a crowd scene and suddenly realizing something striking. Several hundred people were completely still. Not because action had been called, not because the cameras were rolling, but simply because Powell had entered their line of sight, and something in the atmosphere shifted. What made it even more remarkable was who many of those extras were. They were local residents from towns in Tunisia and Morocco, people hired to fill out the crowd scenes. Most were not professional actors. Some had limited English. Many came from Muslim communities, with no personal investment in the Christian story being portrayed. And yet, when the figure of Jesus appeared before them, dressed in simple robes, moving slowly through the crowd with that same quiet stillness, they responded. Some bowed their heads, others watched with expressions the crew later described as genuinely reverent. A few even stepped back without being told, almost instinctively creating space around him. Franco Zeffirelli noticed this happening repeatedly, and he didn't ignore it. In fact, he used it. He began to design certain crowd scenes to take advantage of these natural reactions. Instead of giving heavy direction, he often kept instructions minimal, allowing the extras to simply respond to Powell's presence in whatever way felt real to them. And it worked. The final film reflects it clearly. The crowds in Jesus of Nazareth carry a quality that is rare in biblical cinema. They don't look like people following cues. They look like people witnessing something they don't fully understand, but cannot turn away from. That feeling wasn't manufactured. It emerged naturally from hundreds of people standing in a desert, watching a man they barely knew portray a figure whose story many had grown up hearing. And across the entire production, one thing was mentioned more than anything else: silence. Not the absence of noise in a technical sense, but a consistent, unusual stillness that crew members later described in interviews. Not as something supernatural, not as something beyond explanation, just as something that kept happening again and again in a way no one had predicted. The crucifixion sequence took several days to film. On screen, it lasts about 20 minutes. Creating those 20 minutes on screen required far more than what viewers ever see. Multiple camera setups were used. Scenes were repeated from different angles. Hours were spent adjusting lighting in the open desert sun. And through it all, Robert Powell remained on the cross for long stretches each day. He had physically prepared for the role. In the weeks leading up to filming the crucifixion scenes, Powell followed a strict diet, significantly reducing his food intake, not for a dramatic transformation, but to achieve a visible physical change, a gauntness, a fragility, the kind of look that suggests real suffering. When filming began, the results were obvious. His face had changed. His body looked weakened. The costume and staging completed the illusion. But what unfolded among the people watching was something no one had written into the production. Can you guess what that was? How dumbfounded were the people? How dumbfounded are they till today? Keep watching to find out. The truest cry in all cinema history. Among the hundreds of extras at Golgotha, Roman soldiers, Jerusalem citizens, followers of Jesus, and curious onlookers, many were once again local residents with no professional acting experience. They were given simple instructions: stand here, face this direction, react to what you see. And what they saw was Powell on the cross. The desert sky behind him, Roman soldiers standing still, disciples placed at a distance, their faces filled with grief. And then something changed. People began to cry. Not just a few scattered individuals, not isolated emotional reactions, but a noticeable number of extras in the crowd began to weep during the takes. At first, Zeffirelli thought it was part of the performance. He assumed they had understood the emotional direction and were simply delivering it. So he kept filming. But then something unsettled him. The crying didn't stop when the cameras did. When he called cut, the equipment stopped rolling, but the emotion on set didn't. The lighting crew made their adjustments, and the usual set noise slowly returned. But something didn't reset with it. Some of the extras in the crowd were still visibly emotional, standing in the heat, looking toward the cross. A few were quietly weeping. Through interpreters, Zeffirelli spoke with several of them to understand what they had experienced, and the answers were remarkably similar. They said it didn't feel like a film. Standing that close to the scene, close enough to see Powell's face, close enough to feel the atmosphere of the crowd around them, the line between what was real and what was performance began to blur. One man, speaking through an interpreter, said something Zeffirelli would later recall in interviews. He said that, while standing there, he wasn't thinking about cameras or costumes. He was thinking about one thing: whether the story was true. That question, asked by a man with no acting background, standing in the Tunisian desert in 1976, captures something essential about what made the production so unusual. Even the technical crew wasn't untouched by it. Camera operators, lighting technicians, and sound engineers, people trained to focus on equipment rather than emotion, found themselves behaving differently during those scenes. They spoke in lower voices. They moved more carefully. And between takes, several admitted they felt almost reluctant to speak at all. One crew member later described the feeling as being similar to a place of worship. You understood, logically, that you were allowed to speak at a normal volume, but something in the environment made it feel wrong to do so. The crucifixion sequences were filmed over several days. When it was finally finished, Zeffirelli reportedly sat in silence for a long time before addressing his team. What he said, in essence, was simple. They had just completed the hardest part of the production, not technically, but emotionally, and he believed it showed. He was right. Nearly 50 years later, the Jesus of Nazareth passion sequences remain among the most widely praised portrayals of the crucifixion in film and television history. But productions end. Sets are dismantled. Costumes are returned. Crews move on. Yet something about this production didn't seem to leave the people who made it in the usual way. What was it about this production? How did they pull it off? Let's see. The secret behind the production and crew. Robert Powell has given hundreds of interviews since 1977.
Robert Powell's portrayal is widely regarded as the most powerful Jesus ever seen on screen.
I commit my spirit.
Now, Robert is on a journey across the Holy Land to discover the real Jesus of Nazareth.
In nearly all of them, something subtle shifts in how he speaks when the film comes up. The usual professional distance that actors maintain when discussing their work begins to soften. It becomes more personal. He has said, in different ways over the years, that playing Jesus changed something in him, not in a dramatic conversion story sense, but more quietly than that. The months spent immersed in the Gospels, the discipline of the role, the long days standing in those landscapes and speaking those words all left something behind. Something time didn't simply erase. What's interesting is that Powell has never been especially evangelical about it. He doesn't describe the experience as supernatural. He doesn't frame it as a religious conversion. Instead, he speaks about it like someone recalling something that simply mattered deeply, an experience that carried a weight he didn't anticipate and never fully set down afterward. The actors who played the disciples describe something similar, though from a different angle. By the time the crucifixion scenes were filmed, they had spent months portraying men who walked alongside Jesus throughout his ministry. They shared meals on screen. They traveled together, they argued, they reconciled. Over time, the relationships between the characters weren't just written into the script, they were built through the filming itself. So when the crucifixion scenes arrived, the actors weren't grieving someone they had just met. They were grieving a presence they had lived with for months. Several of them later said those final scenes were among the most emotionally demanding of their careers. Not because the direction was extreme or the script unusually heavy, but because, by then, the emotional reality of the story had settled into them. Performing it no longer felt distant. It felt close to experiencing it. One actor, reflecting years later, said something that stayed with many who heard it. He said that when filming ended, and he removed the costume for the final time, he felt a kind of loss he hadn't expected. Not for the production, not for the cast, but for the character, for the man he had spent months following. That kind of emotional residue is unusual in filmmaking. Productions are long, demanding, and exhausting. Most actors are trained to keep a clear boundary between themselves and the roles they play. But in Jesus of Nazareth, that separation seemed harder to maintain, and in some cases, it wasn't even fully attempted. And that says something about the nature of the material they were working with. There's also the question of the audience and what that meant for the cast. Everyone involved knew the series would be watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. But more than that, they knew something else. For many of those viewers, this was not entertainment. It was sacred. These were not just stories. They were the foundation of faith, the center of religious life, the narrative people had grown up with and would carry for the rest of their lives. How did this awareness change everything? How did it add meaning to the movie? Keep watching to find out. Decades later and still relevant. That awareness shaped everything. There were conversations among the cast about responsibility, about portraying these figures with dignity. There were quiet moments of doubt about whether they were doing justice to the material. And throughout the entire production, there was a seriousness that is rare in filmmaking. A shared understanding that what they were creating was not just a television program, but something that would enter people's homes, hearts, and beliefs in a deeply personal way. That seriousness is visible in the finished film. It's one of the key reasons the series has endured, while so many other biblical productions have faded with time. When audiences watch Jesus of Nazareth, they aren't simply watching skilled actors performing lines. They are watching people who treated the material as if it truly mattered. Because for the duration of that production, it did. The film aired in 1977 and drew an estimated 91 million viewers in the United States alone during its original broadcast. In the decades since, it has been rebroadcast repeatedly, especially during Easter, reaching new generations across countries and cultures around the world. That kind of endurance isn't accidental. Works made with genuine care tend to carry that care onto the screen. Audiences can feel it, even when they can't fully explain what they're responding to. In the case of Jesus of Nazareth, what viewers respond to is the accumulated effect of hundreds of people, actors, crew members, extras, directors, and consultants who approached a 2,000-year-old story with unusual seriousness. And in doing so, they created something that has outlasted almost everything else from its era. Nearly 50 years have passed since filming ended in the Tunisian desert. The sets are long gone. Most of the crew have moved on. Life continued, but the film remains. And so do the memories of those who made it. What happened on that set wasn't one dramatic moment. It was something quieter, and in many ways, more powerful. Hundreds of ordinary people gathered around an extraordinary story and found themselves responding in ways they never expected. Robert Powell's face, as Christ, still lives in the memory of millions. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a story is told by people who, even briefly, believed it deserved their very best. What was the entire story of Jesus of Nazareth? And how intriguing was the plot? Let's see. The Jesus of Nazareth series. Jesus of Nazareth tells its story like a cinematic gospel harmony, blending the accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John into one continuous narrative. It presents Jesus as both fully human and fully divine. From the very beginning, this is made clear. At his baptism in the River Jordan, John the Baptist declares the words believed to come from God. "This is my beloved Son." The story then unfolds in a largely chronological way, moving through the most familiar moments of the Gospel account. The betrothal and later marriage of Mary and Joseph, the Annunciation, the Visitation, the birth of John the Baptist, the Nativity of Jesus, the visit of the Magi, the circumcision of Jesus, the census of Quirinius, the flight into Egypt, and the massacre of the innocents. And the young Jesus was found in the temple. From there, the narrative follows his ministry. We see well-known gospel moments brought to life. The woman caught in adultery, the healing of Jairus' daughter. Jesus is helping Peter with the miraculous catch of fish, the parable of the prodigal son, Matthew's dinner gathering, the Sermon on the Mount, the raising of Lazarus, the feeding of the 5,000, the entry into Jerusalem, and the cleansing of the temple. Alongside these are personal encounters, Jesus speaking with Nicodemus, healing the centurion's servant, and engaging with figures like Joseph of Arimathea. The story also includes a few non-biblical elements, such as imagined conversations, like a dialogue between Jesus and Barabbas, added to deepen the narrative. As the story moves toward its climax, the final days unfold: the Last Supper, Judas's betrayal, Jesus' trial before the Sanhedrin, where he is accused of blasphemy for calling himself the Son of God.
I want to point out of John 20, 30, and 31, and then he shared many of his teachings in a book that he wrote that's found in the Bible. The whole reason he wrote this entire book about the life of Jesus was so that we would know that he is the Son of God.
Caiaphas rejects this claim, declaring the oneness of God. During the crucifixion, Nicodemus reflects on the prophecy of the suffering servant from Isaiah, giving voice to the tragedy unfolding before him. The story doesn't end there. It continues with the discovery of the empty tomb and the appearance of the risen Christ to his disciples. Finally, the film closes on a quiet but powerful note. A non-biblical character, Zerah, stands before the empty tomb with others, overwhelmed by what has happened. He looks into the void and says, "Now it begins. It all begins." The movie first premiered on March 27, 1977, on the Italian channel Rai 1. It was shown as a 5-part series, with one episode airing each week until April 25th. During that run, something remarkable happened. On Palm Sunday, April 3, 1977, the same day the second episode aired, the Pope publicly endorsed the series. In his address, he encouraged the faithful to watch it. The response was overwhelming. In parts of Europe, viewership reached extraordinary levels. Reports from the time suggested that in some major cities, as many as 84% of television owners tuned in. For example, the third episode alone drew an estimated 28 million viewers. When the series reached the United Kingdom and the United States, it was broadcast in a slightly different format, split into 2 extended parts. Both countries aired Part 1 on April 3rd and Part 2 on Easter Sunday, April 10th, 1977. In the UK, the series attracted around 21 million viewers. In the United States, it became an immediate television event. According to the New York Times, the first broadcast dominated its time slot, outperforming every competing program that night. In total, it's estimated that around 90 million people in the U.S. alone saw the series during its original broadcast. Was it successful in other non-English-speaking nations? How successful was it? Keep watching to find out. Successful across culture, how Jesus of Nazareth reached every part of the world. The success wasn't limited to English-speaking countries. In West Germany, where it aired in 4 parts in March 1978, roughly 40% of the audience tuned in. By every measure, Jesus of Nazareth became a massive success. It wasn't just widely watched, it was widely discussed, widely praised, and heavily distributed around the world.
This, Jesus of Nazareth, this is phenomenal. And the fact that all these stars appear in this is very surprising to me. I'd like to think that all these stars appearing in this was an act of faith on their parts.
Critically acclaimed and commercially successful, the production reportedly generated a net profit of around $30 million. And decades later, it still stands as one of the most recognized and enduring portrayals of the life of Christ ever made. The series also received strong support from the highest levels of the Catholic Church. Pope Paul VI famously praised Franco Zeffirelli's work, both privately and in a public address on Palm Sunday, just before the miniseries aired during Holy Week in Italy. Critically, the response was just as positive. Writing for the Washington Post, critic Tom Shales was almost overwhelmed by the production. He described it as so powerful that one is tempted to call it a miracle. He especially praised Zeffirelli's visual style, his use of composition and lighting, which he said was unlike anything previously seen in television films. According to Shales, the series achieved something rare, a deep, convincing sense of time and place, allowing the story's emotional and symbolic power to come through with unusual clarity. He also highlighted Olivia Hussey's portrayal of Mary, noting that she managed to be fragile, mystified, and strong all at once. There was some criticism, though. Shales pointed out that Robert Powell's physical appearance, particularly his gauntness, could be distracting, even making him seem unwell at times. But even with that flaw, he concluded that the series remained an impressive achievement overall. As for Powell's performance itself, it has gone on to receive widespread praise over the years. Many critics and viewers consider it one of the most memorable and defining portrayals of Jesus ever put on screen. What do you think about the unusual things that happened on the set of Jesus of Nazareth? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us as we looked through these human yet supernaturally engineered moments in Jesus of Nazareth. We hope you found this video both interesting and reawakening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to explore more interesting historical moment. See you there.